one of the things that happened today, unrelated to the festivities at the Scouting Combine, but indicative of the NFL's broader attitude toward the pandemic and the country's broader attitude toward the pandemic. All COVID protocols, per agreement of the NFL and the NFL Players Association, Charean, have been suspended. No more mandatory testing, no more requirement to wear masks, subject to local regulations. But this isn't a surprise because that's the direction it was going. Yeah. Anyone at the Scouting Combine could tell you it's like it never even happened. So not a surprise the NFL pulls the plug on all pandemic-related protocols.
It does just seem like a formality, Mike, because they had really cut back even before the playoffs on what the protocols were. So we didn't see a lot of testing. We didn't see a lot of positive tests when the playoffs started, and that was by design. They just stopped and said, if you're asymptomatic, you're not being tested, we'll just assume you don't have COVID and go about our business. But it's been two long years. You know, you and I talked about the last event before the world shut down, really big sporting event, was the Combine 2 years ago. And it's been 2 long years since then. So hopefully we've gotten over this. I will say this, Mike. The NFL did an outstanding job getting through 2 seasons in a pandemic, playing every single game. I think there were 8 games rescheduled this year. It ended up with 95% of the players were fully vaccinated and almost 100% of staff and coaches were fully vaccinated. They just did a terrific job, I think, in the 2 years to get all those games in.
It is amazing, and they did have some luck from time to time. Yep, they did have to have the flexibility to change on the fly, and it got surprisingly dicey in December when we had that weekend where 3 teams were gutted by positive cases as a result of the spread of the Omicron variant, to the point where they almost canceled the games. They were going to just cancel the games, but the union took up the charge and pushed the NFL to postpone that Raiders-Cleveland game, and then it was the Seahawks-Rams game. Was the Washington game postponed that weekend? It was dangerously close to not. How quickly we forget. But that was the most. That was the most dangerous that it had gotten from the standpoint of losing games. But they got through that as well. And then after that, that's when it all started to disappear. That's when they adopted basically don't ask, don't tell. And even though we had some guys tapping out and saying I have symptoms and testing positive between then and the end of the regular season, once the playoffs rolled around, no one was raising their hand and saying I don't feel well, or I've got congestion, or I've got this, or I've got that. And even by the time we went to the Super Bowl, Charean, there were some requirements on paper, but I never got the sense that those requirements were being strictly enforced. They were more for show. And some would say that so much of what happened the last 2 years by way of COVID protocols was for show. It wasn't about public health. It was about creating the impression that the NFL cared about public health. Well, and Mike, you pointed out what seems like years ago, but it actually was only weeks ago, maybe months ago, you questioned is there going to be at some point when the NFL just plays through this, just says we're stopping testing and we're just going to go. And I think we're at that point now. So if COVID comes back, I think we're going to treat it like the flu. We're going to treat it like other illnesses like that if you're sick, stay home, stay out, don't play. And if you're not, if you're asymptomatic, come on, let's go. But I think this is the beginning of that phase that you talked about months ago of, all right, we're treating it like the flu now, and we're just going. And no matter what happens with other strains or anything else, this is how the future's going to be. As the saying goes, the pandemic has become endemic to the population. And I've seen some epidemiologists suggest that we're really not at that point yet, given the hospitalization rates and the death rates. But, nobody cares. That's the bottom line. We have reached our limit. 2 years. That's it. That's the statute of limitations on caring about this thing, even if people are going to continue to get sick, or very dead as a result of this. We have reached the limit of people caring, and we move on with our lives. Whether that's right or wrong, we'll see. Hey, one of the reasons I didn't go to Indy, I don't want to be one of the guinea pigs in the event that this experiment is not well advised. And we'll find out. We'll see if there's spikes in positives, people getting sick, people getting hospitalized, because it was no different from what I understand in Indianapolis this week than it was in 2020 before the pandemic.
Hi, I'm Mike Tirico, and thanks for watching. Make sure to hit subscribe for the latest news and highlights from NBC Sports.